Hello guys, gals, and N-pals. I'm out here in another fine hat in a brand new shooting location, because today we are talking about setting. Setting is the historical, physical, and geographical context of a work of fiction. You've probably already had it described for you in high school, or earlier, as the time and place that a story exists in. But one thing that was always left out in discussions of setting when I was in high school is the question, what is that place like? Usually what we're talking about here is the weather, but I think you can get into describing other features. Like, if your characters are in the forest, right, are the trees sparsely populated with leaves, or is the canopy so thick that you can't tell where the sun is during the daytime? If you're out in a meadow, are there rolling hills? Or is it a sweeping valley? If you're in someone's house, are the walls cluttered with pictures, the tables cluttered with knickknacks, or are the walls and tables and the floor relatively bare? But again, probably the most important thing to consider beyond the where and the when is the weather, because that will set the mood. And we'll get into that later. But first, as always, the information you get is going to depend on the story. Understand that the information authors include about the setting is put there by choice. They tell you whatever they want to about the where and the when that the story takes place in. And so they are making conscious decisions about what to tell you all the time. I think animation probably provides the best example of what I'm talking about. When you're watching a cartoon, there's not a single thing on the screen that was put there for little to no reason. Somebody had to draw it. That means they had to spend time thinking about it, they thought about the shape of it, and how it fits into the world of the story, as well as what it does for the mood of the scene that it appears in, and the characters that interact with it. This is especially true in small, independent animation projects, where character designs, background paintings, and even props all come out of the mind of one person. But it's also true of larger projects. There may be several character designers, background artists, and a prop master, but all of their work has to be approved by the director. This isn't entirely true anymore, because for 2D and 3D animation, and for video games as well, you can now purchase pre-made asset packs and put them into whatever project you're working on. That's what the flames were in the character video that I did. I have all sorts of flame effects now that I can just throw into these videos. However, in literature, instead of everything having to be drawn with a pencil, then inked, and then painted, everything has to be described with words. And if the author goes on too long talking about the same thing, like I just did with the whole animation thing, people can get bored. So they have to put some thought into the details they want to give you and the words they use to give you those details. The info that we, the readers, get could be broad and general, or it could be narrow and specific. In Arthur Conan Doyle's The Five Orange Pips, we know that it is set in London in 1887, in late September. It begins on a stormy night and concludes the next day. We don't know the exact time the story begins, but we do know that it's almost 9 p.m. when Openshaw leaves Sherlock Holmes' apartment at 221B Baker Street. And in this particular case, if you just read this one story, you know that Holmes lives on Baker Street. But if you've read up on Sherlock Holmes, you know his exact address. And let's compare that with The Story of an Hour by Kate Chopin. That one takes place in the daytime, in the beginning of the spring, but for a story called The Story of an Hour, we get no information about which hour of the day it is. We don't know if it's morning or afternoon. We also don't know what city or state it takes place in. There might be some linguistic clues that it takes place in the USA, but A, I'm not sure, and B, if it's there, I doubt it's there intentionally. Like, the author was just speaking in the language that she knows.
Let me explain what just happened there. I realized, on location, reading a script, mid-sentence, that the words that were coming out of my mouth would seem to contradict the thing that I had said earlier about writers choosing exactly the words to describe the location. But it doesn't actually contradict what I was saying, and it took my brain a little while to process that. But here's the thing, in case you're confused. Some words are tied to regions. Think about the word soda. Here here in California and in much of the West Coast, we call it soda. But I think on the East Coast, maybe also in the northern Midwest, they call it pop. In some places, I think other places in the Midwest, they call it cola. In the South, well, in a lot of places in the South, they call it Coke. And that's probably because Coca-Cola's headquarters is located in Georgia. In Europe, if you're drinking a lemon lime soda, like a Sprite or a 7-Up, they call that lemonade. So the point is, if you want to describe a character drinking a soda, you have to choose one of these words. There's no region-free word for soda. Whichever word you choose is going to give the readers a clue to your location. And what I was saying was that there might be some words like that in the story of an hour, but it's either a situation where the author had to choose one region or another because there's no region-free word, or there's also the possibility that, nobody knows all of the English language. Everybody has a limited vocabulary in some form or another, so there might be words that would be region-free that, your author might not know. But still, they choose from the words that they have. That's why what I was saying about terminology giving a clue as to the author's location doesn't contradict what I was saying about the author choosing very carefully the words that they use.
It could really be any rural town in any English-speaking country. And that has the effect of making it more relatable to people anywhere in the English-speaking world. It doesn't matter if you don't live in Louisiana like Kate Chopin did, you can put yourself in Mrs. Mallard's shoes. And then, of course, some details may be included while others are left out. That's not good. And then, of course, some details may be included while others are left out. My dinner with Calais is set around dinner time, but we don't know how early or late these people eat. We don't know the year, the season, or the month. If I recall correctly, we don't even know if it's light or dark outside. We know that they meet in a bar called Devil's, and that they move to a restaurant called Croyez, or in the French pronunciation, Croyer. But we don't know what city they're in, or even which country. And just like with the story of an hour, there's a reason for leaving out those specific details. See, Anson is using this story to convince teachers to try assigning dialogue assignments, and he's trying to appeal to teachers all over the world. The use of a character with a French name and a restaurant with a French name means that the location of the story might not even be limited to English-speaking countries. Now think about it, if the whole thing were translated into Spanish, and if you were a teacher in a Spanish-speaking country, you could easily put yourself in Stephen's shoes. Okay, let's talk about the historical setting. As you know from the video on the 5 orange pips, knowing the events, customs, and sentiments of a particular historical period can be important for understanding a story. Again, sometimes specifics are beneficial, but sometimes you just need to know the broad strokes of history. The story of an hour was written in the late 1800s, and it's set around that time. But because women have been oppressed for so long in so many countries, it could have been set 70 years later or 300 years earlier without making much difference. I mean, depending on the country, it could be set in the present or thousands of years in the past. Though I guess thousands of years in the past, the event that set everything in motion would have to be some sort of wagon train accident rather than a steam engine. But the point still stands. Now, if you don't have the time, ability, or interest to dive into the details of a specific historic period, in a more broad sense, it's just helpful to know if the story is set during wartime or peacetime, or during a period of financial strife and civil unrest without necessarily having a war. Certain events or certain reactions to events may be explained by what was going on at the time. I've written down here Die Hard as an example, and what I'm really considering is all movies that have scenes that take place in an airport or on an airplane. Consider these scenes before and after September 11th. So like in the beginning of Die Hard, which was made and set in the late 1980s, John McClane is talking to the guy next to him on an airplane. When the plane lands, he gets up to grab his luggage from the overhead bin, and the guy in the seat sees that he has a gun in a shoulder holster. And John looks at him and says, "Don't worry, I'm a cop." And that's pretty much the end of it. If you did that in a movie now, people in the audience would be like, I thought only air marshals could carry guns onto an airplane. And I thought they had to keep the fact that they're air marshals a secret. Or consider the movie Love Actually. That movie it's a collection of love stories that are somewhat intertwined because the characters are connected. Like, one guy is in love with his best friend's girlfriend, and she works with a woman who is in love with one of their coworkers, and the owner of the company that they work for is in love with his housekeeper. They're all sort of loosely connected. I don't remember what all the different stories were. I don't think I got all of those right, but you get the idea. Now, one of those stories is a kid who is in love with a girl in his class, and she is going away with her family for the Christmas break. At the climax of the movie, the kid's dad drives into the airport to try to say goodbye and let her know how he feels. They, of course, get stopped at airport security. Then the dad does something and creates a distraction, and the kid, runs under the ropes and runs past the distracted guards, and, he gets all the way to the gate. He gets to the girl before she boards the plane. He gives her a little Christmas gift and tells her how he feels. Yay! This movie came out in 2003, which means it was made partly during the year following the September 11th attacks. So post 9/11 security checkpoints are a thing in the movie, but they aren't taken seriously. When they first started to introduce those measures in real life, we all thought they were temporary. So it was plausible that a boy and his dad could do this. Sneak past security and freak everybody out, and then go home. But if you tried to put that in a movie now, people in the audience would be wondering why they weren't immediately tackled to the ground and taken to jail. But you see what I'm talking about here. The historical information isn't always about giving a story a deeper symbolic meaning. Sometimes it's just about having the knowledge in order to make the plot make sense. Moving on to geographical setting. As we've already discussed, sometimes the location is important, and sometimes it's not. But sometimes it's not even a real location. Middle-earth, Narnia, Wonderland, Gallifrey, Duckburg. These are all fictional locations, and they range in size from a city to a planet. Of course, sometimes you have a fictional place that is located in the otherwise real world. The classic example is Tom Sawyer, who grew up in the fictional town of St. Petersburg in the real state of Missouri. From our own readings, Tres Camarones from Into the Beautiful North is a fictional town in the real Mexican state of Sinaloa. I assume I don't have to tell you that Mexico is real. Now, this allows the author to capture the general vibe of an area without committing to a real location. And, having to include real landmarks and real local politics. Lastly, let's talk about the physical setting. What the place is like at the time that we are there. As mentioned earlier, this is the part that most people overlook. But it's a very important part of this aspect of literature because it sets the tone, or the mood, or the atmosphere, whatever you really want to call it. Think about the story of an hour. It talks about the fluffy white clouds in the sky, patches of clear blue here and there. The world outside the window is just teeming with life, and it elevates the mood. While Mrs. Mallard is dealing with her husband's death and coming to a conclusion that might seem absurd when you first read it, the description of the world outside is hopeful. It lets us know that this is not a tragic moment. It also lets us know that she hasn't been driven insane by her grief. But like everything that we've been talking about, the effect that the weather brings is going to depend on the story itself. These details work together with or against other details to create the whole picture. This stuff carries a symbolic meaning as well as just a general feeling. If the story or a scene in the story is set inside, a scene set inside could convey a sense of comfort or security. Or a scene set inside might be cramped and convey a sense of confinement or restriction. If a scene is set in an open field, that could represent freedom, or it could represent isolation.
Rain can be dreary, gloomy, even dangerous. Or rain can be refreshing, it can be cleansing, It can symbolize life.
I think about rain in The Lion King versus the rain in the Five Orange Pips. In the Five Orange Pips, not only is the storm literally dangerous, the story begins with Watson presenting it as a representation of the dangers of nature and the unknown. Right? The storm also provides cover for the murderers in two ways. It allows them to commit the crime without being seen, and it causes the police to declare that Openshaw's death was an accident, so they don't bother to investigate. Then, the same storm prevents Holmes from capturing the murderers. It's all very negative. However, in The Lion King, right, leading up to the climax, everything is dry and dead. Then Simba fights Scar, a fire breaks out, Simba wins, and when Simba steps out onto Pride Rock to roar in victory, the rain starts to fall. The rain puts the fires out, and then the shot fades to some time in the future when all of the plants have grown back and the other animals have returned. The rain cleaned the slate and ushered in a new era of prosperity for the lions. Alright, once again, I have a checklist for helping you tease out information about this topic that can be applied to any story. But once again, you don't have to worry about reading through it right here in the video because I've posted it in Canvas and in the video description down below. So thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in class.
I've been sitting on this script for weeks waiting for it to rain. I finally wake up one day, it's pouring down rain. I get dressed, I come out, and this is what I'm dealing with. Gray skies. It's not even wet anymore.